Name is Michael Jocks. This talk is going to be on St. Augustine's three goods of marriage: permanence, fidelity, and procreation for the sake of raising children. I plan on introducing this subject to Archbishop Cordileone, who's been very much involved in fighting to defend marriage over the last decade and is now Archbishop of San Francisco. After his brief introduction, I would like to take the time to connect some dots and explain things that a lot of people have never heard of before. Bear with me, this will be good. When it's done, I'll ask you, is it worthwhile to turn around and share this? Is it worthwhile to put this out there, because it's not being taught in so many catechetical programs and not being taught by the vast majority of pulpits out there. So take a look, listen, and see what you can learn from this, and see if this is helpful to what's going on in our culture. Thank you.
Catholic canonical understanding of marriage really is the basic understanding of marriage throughout all of society. What constitutes marriage? Those three Augustinian goods of marriage.
There are proofs of it. This is not something subjective.
No, it's not really part of revealed truth. We can know this from the nature of marriage itself. And again, recognized by all societies, it's a permanent commitment. It's one of exclusive fidelity, and it's one for the procreation and upbringing of children. Well, we can think about what's been going on in our society. We can start with the 60s, even though, like I said, that was a culmination of so much that was going on before for a long time. But we can think about the no-fault divorce laws that were being passed in the late 60s and in the 70s, undermining the understanding of marriage as a permanent commitment. Couples entering into these so-called open marriages where fidelity wasn't a need to observe. Couples entering into marriages where they intended not to have children. So we can see what uniquely defines marriage as the good that it is already beginning to erode. What we're facing now in terms of this redefinition of marriage is the latest and perhaps, and I would suggest, the most serious attack. But it's really, you can understand where we've come from. Ultimately, I think really brought this to the fore is the contraceptive mentality. Unfortunately, all of these social forces coalesced right at the moment that the birth control pill was invented and marketed and presented as if this was something that was going to be liberating and was going to reduce poverty. This contraceptive mentality then that divorces the procreative meaning of the marital embrace from its unitive meaning, reduces that to something done merely for pleasure. It's recreational, and if you want, you can add on this idea of doing it for bringing a child into the world. But it's not essential to the act, and now we see the effects with the undermining of marriage and family life in the country.
And I think it leaves Catholics today included that
if you do not know where you came from, you do not know where we're going, and are thus easily misled. We have all been badly misled. Abortion, euthanasia, the destruction of chastity, marriage, single parenthood households, out of wedlock pregnancies are at the heart of the crisis that is plaguing and destroying the modern world. The vast majority of people don't know this, but 3.5% of the babies born out of wedlock back in the 1940s. This increased to 5% in 1960, and to now 41% born out of wedlock as of 2010. This is unsustainable, with the poverty, welfare, youth raised by single parenthoods without guidance from father, mother. Is it any wonder we have so much violence from our youth? So much failure of our schools being able to educate undisciplined children? Over 50% of our marriages in divorce, fornication in our youth and adults, infidelity of the marital partners to abortion on demand, dismemberment, decapitation of little babies in the womb for the sake of pleasure. How did this all come to be? What all happened? Back in the early 1960s, 1961 to be exact, the courts would legalize birth control within marriage. Prior to 1961, birth control for all purposes was illegal in this country. You could not market it and could not sell it. Following that, the courts in 1971 would legalize birth control for unmarried people So now we have approval for fornication and adultery. In the late 1970s, the courts would legalize the distribution of contraceptives to minors and establish confidentiality laws to shield the minors' activity from their parents. Soon after, schools began to teach in their health and family consumer education that fornication was all right, just so long as you contracepted. And they would teach them where to get all the reproductive resources. The connection between contraception and abortion is primarily this. Contraception facilitates the kind of relationships, even the kind of attitudes and moral character that are likely to lead to abortion. The contraceptive mentality treats sexual behavior as though it had little connection with babies. It thinks of babies as an accident of intercourse, as an unwelcome intrusion into the sexual relationship or a burden. The sexual revolution has no fondness nor room for the connection between sexual intercourse and babies. St. Augustine was the first to pronounce this, the three goods which define marriage, which is fidelity, permanence of the marriage, and procreation for the benefit of raising children. Archbishop Corleone had this to say, "I am convinced that the error of thinking of marriage as solely for the benefit of adults comes from the contraceptive mentality." The Church has always understood that the two ends of marriage are first procreation and education of offspring, and second the union of the man-woman and the mutual good of the two spouses. They're inseparable. The contraceptive mentality, however, attempts to divorce or separate these two issues. When the contraception became much more available and prevalent because of the marketing as well as technology in the 1960s, we began to see much more sexual promiscuity. With more sexual promiscuity, you have more children out of wedlock. Because contraception is not perfect, it misfires, so to speak. Children are conceived, and we now need abortion as a backup. We saw sexual promiscuity, which led to the novel concept of the so-called open marriage that strikes down the good of fidelity in marriage. Then we saw couples entering into marriage without the intervention or intention of having children. So that strikes down procreation. And in the early 70s, we had states passing laws allowing for no-fault divorce. And when we're in a divorce culture rather than a marriage culture, that strikes down the permanence of marriage. So this erosion in the meaning of marriage has been going on for a very long time. The results of changing definition is that marriage can become drained of all of its meaning. Because it can be defined in any way people involved want to define it. If we start changing what is essential to marriage in its definition, there is no end to it. If it doesn't have to be a man and a woman, why does it have to be two people? Can there be several partners and a female in a marriage? Who's to say it should be limited to two? So what is the point of government giving benefits to married people? When we defend marriage between man and woman, our opponents try to say that you're imposing our religion on everyone else. This is not a matter of religion. This is how every society has understood marriage in all human history. The truth is, they're imposing their new idea of a marriage, and ideas that no society has ever had before. That homosexuality marriage can be okay on everyone else. This is a very serious social experiment that will have dire consequences. Marriage is supposed to help us to love for real. In order for that to happen, we need to totally give ourselves over to someone else in love and receive the other's total self-love. What happens in the use of contraception, rather than embracing us totally as God made each other, with the masculine capacity to become a dad and the feminine capacity to become a mom, we reject that paternal and maternal leaning. Contraception can be seen as the gateway to exploitation. When that petition is made for the contraception, it is going to make pleasure the point of the act. And any time pleasure becomes the point rather than the fruit of the act, the other person becomes the means to an end. And we actually are going to hurt people we love. Contraception makes it easier for extramarital relations to happen, even thrive. Contraceptive sex is self-indulgent, hearty and authentic expression of love and total donation to another. It enables women to demand even unwittingly by being treated by men as mere objects and used selfishly for gratification. It's the women who intuitively get how divorcing sex from procreation allows men to use them. In his experience, it is almost always the women who move toward abandoning artificial contraception. Contraceptive technology precisely becomes of its impact on sexual intimacy has subverted our understanding and purpose of sexuality, fertility, marriage itself. It has detached from the natural or organic identity of human persons and disrupted the ecology of human relations. It has scrambled our vocabulary of love just as pride has scrambled our vocabulary at Babel. We were warned about all this. We were warned about the counterfeit to marriage, of promiscuity, of the hookup culture, of cohabitation. You see, back in 1931, the Anglican Church was the first church to abandon the teaching on contraception. Prior to that, all your Christian denominations, without exception, all forbade contraception and marriage as a great evil if used. The Washington Post was the first to turn on and publish an article in relationship to England's rejection. And now, 75 years later, that same church that now approves gay marriage and ordination of gay priests and bishops. The Washington Post had this to stated, carried to its logical conclusion, the committee report, if carried into effect, would sound the death kill of marriage as a holy institution by establishing degrading practices which would encourage indiscriminate immorality. The suggestion that the use of legalized contraception would be careful and unrestrained is preposterous. Unquote from the Washington Post back in 1931, March 24. Pope Paul VI again would remind us in Humani Vitae what would be the consequences of rejecting the Church's teaching on contraception. Widespread conjugal infidelity and a general lowering of morality. Few would deny the rates of abortion, divorce, and family and breakdown, wife and child abuse, venereal disease, out of wedlock pregnancies have all massively increased since the mid-1960s. Obviously, the birth control has not been the only factor in unraveling it, but it has played a major role. Men in general have lost respect for women, no longer care for her physical or psychological equilibrium, to a point that the women are considered as mere instruments of selfish enjoyment and no longer as his respected, beloved companion. The widespread use of contraception has placed a dangerous weapon in the hands of the public authorities, and take no heed for moral exegesis, as we have seen since discovered with eugenics, and did not disappear with the Nazi racial theories in 1945. Population control policies are now accepted and part of nearly every foreign discussion. Contraception has misled humans into thinking that they have unlimited dominion over their bodies, relentlessly churning human persons into objects of his or her own intrusive powers. A man and a woman participate uniquely in the glory of God by their ability to co-create new life with him. At the heart of the contraception, however, is the assumption that fertility is an infection, which could be attacked and controlled exactly as antibiotics attack bacteria. In this attitude, we can now see the organic link between contraception and abortion. If fertility can be misrepresented as an infection to be attacked, so too can new life. I'd like to share with you a piece I put together on boundaries for sexual relations. Boundaries for sexual relations is marriage. The passion, warmth, and beauty of a fire of sexual relations are like that of a burning fire in a fireplace. Once outside of their natural boundaries, both sexual relations and fire will destroy the individual and people around them, and everything you have and own. This is the devastating effect of sexual passions outside of natural bounds of marriage. This is the effect of the counterfeit marriages. All sexual relations outside of marriage work toward weakening and eliminating marriage as an institution. Anything that weakens and causes the destruction of marital bonds ultimately works toward the destruction of the well-being and character of children and ultimately of our society at large. Sexual passions before marriage create self-centered gratification, using people to meet one's own selfish sexual desires. Women and men can become sexual commodities to be bought and sold and traded, all to meet this self-gratification. Pornography, anyone? One streetcar becomes as good as another. Miss one, there'll be another in 15 minutes. If we do not learn to control our passions before marriage, there will be no reason to expect our passions will be controlled after marriage. Tiger Woods is a perfect example. Hence, pornography to entice one's sexual pleasure. Marital affairs can run rampant in today's society, all working to tear marriage apart. If we do not learn to control our passions, we will expect our passions to be controlled after our marriage. If we are participating in self-gratification of sexual relations prior to marriage, we are engaged in using people to meet our wants and selfishness, the exact opposite of what marriage is all about. You see, marriage is meant to be self-giving through self-sacrifice. We end up marrying the wrong person because we are blinded by our sexual activity and never truly learning what our partner was like before marriage. We marry wrongly because we marry with the attitude of what's in it for me. And when that relationship grows tired or weary, we bail out for another streetcar. Only the chaste man and the chaste woman are capable of true love. For chastity frees their association, including marital intercourse, from that tendency to use a person. Chastity is so necessary for love. We must seek to cultivate authentic love for the person of himself or herself by directing our attitude toward the whole person, by looking beyond the physical and psychological attributes and seeing the actual person. We open the door to the least possibility of willing the good of the other. Authentic love must be integrated with the higher, nobler aspects of love, such as goodwill, friendship, virtue, and self-giving. True love involves virtue and friendship in pursuit of common good. In a Christian marriage, a husband and wife unite themselves in the common aim of helping each other grow in holiness and deepening their union and raising children. Furthermore, they should not only share this common goal, but also have the virtue to help each other get there. It is in self-giving love a man recognizes in a profound way that his life is not his own. He has surrendered his own will to his beloved. Do you want a good, healthy marriage, or do you want to settle for less? For the breakdown of over 50% of the marriages, the choice is yours. Life or death. Choose life. Choose life. Choose true love. Is this worth sharing? Is this worth passing out? But certainly this has failed to be taught for a long time from the church pulpits and many catechetical programs out there. Can you turn around and help teach this to our youth and help other adults understand what is going on here? Thank you.